So this is kind of a little quick introduction to just what is it that compositors do, what compositing is all about. So not going technical at all today, but just kind of giving you some examples of why I find compositing fascinating enough to actually sort of dedicate my whole career to it. So let's just kind of jump straight into it. So we'll start with the definitions. So long sentence here, but taking it from Steve Wright, because he's the not the father of compositing, but or the grandfather either, but he has written a very thorough and substantial book about it. So just read it out as well for you guys. So the ultimate idea of compositing is to take different images from different sources and to combine them in a way that it looks like they're shot at the same time under the same lighting conditions with the same camera. So as a compositor, we are the final step in the visual effects pipeline. We take everything and we put everything together, and we are also kind of that one place where all these kind of different sources merge together, and we sort of have a lot of power over the final look of the shot. So this whole webinar as well, it's kind of a brief introduction. So at any stage as well, if you want to kind of interrupt and ask any questions, feel free to do so. I think there's a Q&A function for here. I'll try to keep an eye on mother screen, see if there's any questions popping up or not. But in the otherwise, I'll just keep going. So the main question is, what do compositors do? We combine different sources and make it appear, and this is important, they only need to appear to have been shot at the same time with the same lighting conditions with the same camera. So, and that's enough for us. Actually, if it looks right, then it is right. When you're working with 3D, then you want to kind of work with measurements and scales. So when you're making a building that's 10 meters high, and when it collapses, you want to make sure that the scale is set to 10 meters high, because then obviously things that are falling will take, however long they take second and a half a second to fall down, because otherwise the animation would be wrong. If it's 10 centimeters wrong, it just collapses really quickly. In compositing, we are at the stage where we are the final step. So in some ways we have the freedom to fake things. We just need to make things look like they are real. So for example, in this shot, you can see a robot shoots you. Let's go back to this. So a robot shoots us, and but then when you actually look at it, none of this is real. So this is from one of our students' work. They were doing a project, and they had some drone plates that they had shot in the background, but for this actual clip, this is all a still image, and it's a still image with some CG elements. So the wall was made by 3D artist, and the robot was made by 3D artist, but everything else, putting all of this together, doing the sky, picking the trees, all that stuff, that's pure 2D. So as compositors, we take all these elements and we make them kind of look like they've always been together. And if you really go sort of quite granular into this, then for example, when we add some small lightning effects in here, electricity happening, then what we have to do is we have to kind of generate this lightning effect nearby, that it actually looks like these things are actually interacting. They were there at the same time, under the same lighting conditions. If there's a flash happening here, we want this flash also on these highlights over here. This is again something that if it's made in 3D in the first place, then this will kind of happen naturally, but all the elements aren't always made in 3D. And then the other part of this is like we want them to look like they've been shot with the same camera. So same angle, same everything, lighting conditions here, make it look like it's all overcast, but with the same camera as well. So if there's the lightning effect that's happening in the camera, like a flare or something like that, that happens in the camera. So that's the last effect that goes on top of everything. So this is from the artistic point of view, what we actually do. We take all these different elements and we put them all together. Just quickly checking the chat in here. There's nothing there yet, and Q&A is empty too. So if at any time you want to check anything, please do. So moving on. Originally, back in the days, this is how compositing happened. And this is still actually kind of similar to how compositing happens these days. This is taken from the special effects book, which has a slightly confusing title because most of that book is actually visual effects. But that aside, in the old days, when you wanted to composite films together, you would have to have few filmed elements. You would have to have a matte that cuts out the part of the element that you want. So for example, if you want the spaceship that was filmed over a blue background, you would make a matte that only contains the part of the element, the spaceship, and not the blue background. And you would have to have the inverse background to kind of have a hole where you want to see the background element. And this is the very basic of compositing. Back in the days, this was the only way of doing it. How you actually get the matte, that's part of the challenge. So, and that's still part of the challenge. But that's how it happens in the end. You take those two films, you project them using this optical printer device into another kind of camera. So you project it from a projector straight into the camera, and you project two of them at the same time. And what you will get is basically one combined image where they line up together. But this process is actually the same as it is these days, except these days we do it with the computer. So with the computer, we just make a black and white image that will be the matte, and that allows us to combine our different elements. And the invert matte, that's just the kind of extra part of the process during the merging. So quite often that happens behind the scene. Although if you understand how it works, you can also use it to your advantage in occasions where we do keying and things, which I will cover in a moment. So how do we get those mattes? So one option is to simply cut things out. So rotoscoping is the art of cutting things out. And I'm showing this example here from Tim Adams, who was our student in the past. And why I like to show you this example is that when Tim made his reel, let's go back to that in there. When he made his reel, he had really good rote on it. And the way that you actually do this is you don't trace every edge on every single frame, because there's 25 frames every second. So something that's moving quite slowly, if you trace it, it will jitter between those two different frames. Also, new details will appear if you try to make a new shape every single frame. But what you do instead is you cut everything out into smaller, tinier steps and smaller shapes. So you would have like a curve over here, another curve over here, another kind of curve over there. You overlap them and you animate them. So the similar way that 2D animators, they do keyframes. So when you have a pose, like a hand is down in the end and the hand is up in the beginning, then between it will interpolate, hopefully, to be kind of be moving down. So the similar way, we draw tiny shapes and we cut things out, one thing at a time. It's a laborious process to some degree, but it also can be quite zen. It's very calming. You know exactly what you're going, getting for. You just need to cut things out until you can see them, until they've been cut out perfectly. So Tim, why I like to show his shot as well is that he did a shot like this, and and from the shot, we hired him initially as a studio assistant, knowing that he already had a contract with MPC. So a week later, but I needed him as a studio assistant anyway for a week. So I was like, okay, a week is fine. Yeah, even 1 week with a good studio assistant is helpful. And then 1 week later, he joined MPC, and 1 week after that, he moved from MPC to double negative. So if you can show these core skills done in a really good way, that's just basically what you need for getting a job. So the softwares that people use for this, in the industry, people use Silhouette in the biggest companies, but also smaller places, because they use Nuke for most compositing anyway. You can do a quite good roto inside of Nuke too, so you can just do it all in there. But if you have Silhouette available for you and you want to learn it, then that's definitely a good one to do. I have a question from an anonymous attendee. I will answer your question in a while. I will come back to that, but that's a good question, so I'm not going to forget that. If anyone else has questions, please drop them in the link. So here I have another example of rotoscoping, and also kind of why you would need to do this. So for this shot, basically the idea was to get rid of the people at the back, and what Andres did, who is now working in Jellyfish, but after working on this, he went to Milk Visual Effects first. And he recreated this water using these 2D elements, just kind of reflecting what this thing up and down, putting some noise in there so it looks like it's waves, and putting some trees at the back, making them move the same way. And but you need to put the real people back on top. So what he did is he cut out all the people. He cut out even some of the water and splashes that could go on top. And the tricky bits in here as well is when things are moving, you have this effect called motion blur. You have to kind of get the hair detail and all of that in there as well. So you have to kind of really cut things properly, so that when you put them back on top, it will look like they have always been there. And again, this goes back to the beginning of what is it that compositors do. We take different elements and we kind of put them together, and it just needs to look like it's always been that way. So this is the art of how do you make your mats. You cut them out. So one way of doing things is, you just draw small shapes effectively every frame. You try to optimize it again, like if he's here in this frame and he's here 10 frames later, maybe he will be moving between those. So some of that we can get the computer to do for us, and that's the art of making sure that again, these different softwares have a different piece of bit of ability for that. Keying is another way of making mats. So keying is the preferred option when you have hair details, or what you need for that is you need to have some kind of a separation between your foreground and background. If you know that you're going to be doing a shot like this in visual effects, then you can choose to shoot the person in front of a green screen. And effectively what happens is you tell the computer that if it is green, then it is foreground. If it is not green, sorry, if it is green, then it is background. If it is not green, then it is foreground. So anything that is green, we could replace with the background. Now, that's sort of how it works in principle, but in practice, what you will actually find is that here in the background, first of all, we don't have everything that is green. We have things that are different color here as well. Also, the variants of different colors of green can be very different. So this color of green in here is like dark green. This is bright green. Here I have some yellows. So there's a whole range of green colors. And when the green light is bouncing around, we actually get some green light on her as well, on the foreground characters. So what we then need to do is we need to color correct them in a way that make sure that they don't look green anymore. They would fit whatever environment we put them into. And the other thing about this green screens is that we have this kind of whole range of bright and dark green values in here, and this could be blue as well. Blue screen is a really good choice for keying as well. If there's ever a debate between shooting green screen and blue screen, they're both good options. They have their own benefits and downsides. Blue is better for skin color, so if we get some blue spill and we take that out, the skin color doesn't change as much. If you try to take out green, because the skin already has quite a bit of green color in it, then you have to be careful when you change the colors. But green, the cameras actually pick up differences in green better, so it's better for finding the separation between foreground and background. So they both have their ups and downs. So when you have lots of background variation, so dark shadows here, bright highlights here, and then when you actually look at what is the foreground, so you can see here, this is solid foreground. This is like completely black color. Let's say that's foreground. But these values in here, when the hair is sort of semi-transparent, it's moving around. It's motion blurred again. We actually get a mixture of foreground and background. So the art of a compositor is trying to extract these details and tell the computer that this is hair detail. These I want to keep. These kind of shades of dark green, whereas these shades of dark green, they are background. So what you actually end up doing is you actually end up doing a mixture of sort of rotoscoping and keying. You draw shapes around certain areas to make sure that those areas are selected appropriately and treated appropriately. So when we play this, what we should hope to see is if you look at it here, again, I keep using my shortcuts from the old habit of using Nuke, but I'll just pause it here. Is you would hope to get all of these hair details also in your matte and nothing else going on in the background, so that whatever is this transparency here, if it is white, it is fully opaque. If it is black, it is fully transparent. If it is some shade between black and white, then that's a semi-transparency. So that's something where in the final composite, I should also see a mixture of the hair color and mixture of the color that's behind her. And this background, again, it was originally actually a slightly different shot from it was a similar angle, but because the foreground camera was moving in a certain way, the green screen camera has a camera move, and the background footage also had a slightly different move. Then as a compositor, what you have to do is you have to make it look like they all move exactly the same way. So what Katla, who created this shot, did is she reprojected a lot of this background. She recreated this water and recreated these reflections to make it look like this is a real background. It's based on footage, but actually it ends up being fully made up. And again, the important thing is it doesn't matter. It's meant to appear as if it's real. It doesn't have to be real. It's like in the real world, this wall was actually a few meters further back. That doesn't matter. It looks real. Likewise, the sky was actually a still image, and again, we're just looking at the inside of the still image, which we put on a sphere, so we just kind of see kind of the inside of it, and as long as it looks right, then it is right. So another nice example of keying. So this one is from Katla, from who made the previous shot. She works at Ghost Effects in, I'm gonna go somewhere in Scandinavia, and Whitney, who was actually in the girl in the previous shot, she works in Territory Studios in London as a compositor. So this shot again shows the kind of what you can do with keying, and also what you have to kind of consider when you're doing keying. This background here was a still image. So fully still image, just a photo. And Evelyn, who made this shot, and she works as a compositor now in Hong Kong, and Tyler, who works as a compositor in South Africa. What they did is, well, what Evelyn did for this shot is she took the still image, she created some proxy geometry, so just some cubes inside of Nuke, and she projected that photo onto them and cleaned up a little bit behind it. So between the pillars, created some extra textures. So when you look at it, it feels like you're actually looking at some moving geometry, but really it's just one still frame projected from one angle. If you went a little bit further, that illusion would break. We would see that actually there's no more texture there. But from this angle, it works. And she did it so well that she also did this semi-transparency here. So she made it look like you can see through the glass. And in addition to that, she made a reflection in the ceiling where she took the whole world, drops it upside down. When the camera moves, it all reflects, and she adds a little bit of warp onto it. So it looks like it's a kind of warpy looking reflection, which is cool. And then the other things you kind of find out, which is, again, from the Steve Wright's quote in the beginning, is that things have to look like they were shot in the same lighting conditions. So we did try to do some same lighting conditions. Here is another one of my students doing the because we didn't have a flag, we just used a big black coat to block out that light so it wouldn't give us lens flare in the shot. But we put a light behind her to make it look like, okay, this is something that's meant to match that environment where she ends up in the end. But when we comped her in this, we realized that over here, Tyler's legs are occluded by this edge. So there should be a shadow. Whereas in the original shot, this chair was open from beneath. So the light that was back there was actually showing light onto the boots as well. So when you're comping it together, you have to try to remove some of that light. So you kind of grade it darker. You just darken it a little bit. But again, you have to make it look like everything is working with the same lighting scenario, that we shot it at the same time with the same camera from the same angle, and all these elements, they're at the same time. So they all move accordingly and under the same lighting conditions. So this light here could emulate some light coming from there. And, we had to kind of create some more shadows in here to make it look like, because, that's what it looked like in the final shot in here. So this is keying. So keying is the art of separating the background using some kind of a color, for example, or brightness, or whatever is the uniform thing in your background or in your foreground that allows you to make a map more quickly. So you don't have to draw things. But the art of compositing is still putting things together and considering what is needed to really make things blend together. So this is a nice example of a process called rotoprep. So Andres, the same guy who did the rowing boat people earlier, he did this shot. So rotoprep, or paint and prep more specifically, is the art of removing things. And this is something that happens in every single film. Pretty much as sound design happens in every single film, as editing happens in every single film, and cinematography happens in every single film. Prep and cleanup is now happening in every single film as well. For music videos, for TV shows, there is always going to be something in the shot that's not meant to be there. And these days, people will not just leave it there. They will hire someone who can actually fix it and get rid of it. So, for example, in this shot in here, if you needed this to look old and period appropriate, then they couldn't have had plastic buckets back then, or this slow vehicle sign. So you have to get rid of them. But getting rid of things is easy. What's the challenging part is recreating what is behind it. So Andres here has gone to extreme lengths to recreate these wheels, the chassis, all these other words that describe parts of a horse carriage that I don't know. The springy thingy, let's call it that. Just by making it, taking copies of it from here and here and making all these elements look like they blended together. This wheel, we copied this foreground one to be over there, but in order to do that, you have to kind of make it look like it's in shadow. So there's a lot of work of recreating what wasn't actually there. So removing things is bread and butter of modern compositing. And he actually had to make some horse legs and things like that. So lots of kind of details. The other bits that he added in here, like the removing that guy and replacing him with one of our other compositing students, that was just kind of an added bonus. But and then maybe in this shot it was only meant to be one horse, so you remove the other horse. And this happens in every movie. There is always going to be a car parked somewhere that during the filming they just couldn't get the guy to remove their car. If it's a period drama, it's always going to have some modern traffic lights. One example, one of my studio assistants told me of is David Fincher did the Mindhunter, I think, and in that one, because it's 70s, people are stepping off a curb, and apparently back in the 70s the curbs were higher, because these days you have a kind of drop off on a curb, so it's kind of you can to go down with a wheelchair or something like that. But back then they apparently didn't, so you had to step a little bit higher. But when you film it these days, that's not there. So this is just one of these kind of small elements that you have to add into the shot just to make it look perfect. And directors, when they get the opportunity to have this kind of control, to be able to remove things that they don't want, they will use it. They will use it as much as they can. So here's another example of something kind of that's been a lot more popular recently. So aging and de-aging. So digital makeup, retouching, and The Irishman was a good example of that with Robert De Niro. There's the Will Smith film where he's fighting his own younger self. Happens all the time now, and every now and again you get people like Russell, what's his name? Not Russell Crowe, the other one, Kurt Russell, in Guardians of the Galaxy, second one. He was like, "Oh, most of this was makeup." Yes, most of this was makeup digitally. So they didn't really have to do much to me. It's like they just filmed this on the set, and that just do a little bit of kind of retouching here and here. It's quite a bit. So that's something that happens a lot, and it happens in both directions. You can make people look older, and the classic example of that is I think that one they used to do with actual makeup in Saving Private Ryan. It's the classic shot of Matt Damon kind of becoming old, but that was a morph. That's you shoot a young version of him and an old version of him with kind of plastic makeup, and you morph between them. But films like Benjamin Button, you actually recreate the whole digital person, and so that you can de-age them. But films like The Irishman, that one is very heavily comp. So it's a lot of this kind of small patchworks, compositors, very similar to what the previous shot was about horse carriage. you remove wrinkles, but when you remove wrinkles, you actually have to kind of think like, well, what was actually there beforehand? So when this shot was made, we had to figure out, the nose probably would have been smaller. The cheeks, they would have dropped afterwards. So we've kind of just aligned also the jawline and things like that. So it's not just about removing wrinkles. It's about thinking what does it actually meant to look like? What does the aging process do to the face? And in addition to just normal blemishes, we add scars, we take away scars. That happens very regularly because scars quite often on the set it's a makeup, but then you shoot some shoots one day, then you go back to another day, the makeup doesn't exactly look the same. But now you put these shots in the edit, you put them one after another, suddenly the scar has moved a little bit from here to here. So what do? You take out the original scar in post, and you take the other one from the other shot and you put it there, so it now looks the same. So you know, we fix everything. We can make make fixes, and that's all cool. But that's all kind of, you know, it's like, you know, it doesn't sound that creative necessarily. It's very nice to do, and I like sort of doing things like de-aging and cleanup as well, because for me there is always a very clear end goal. It's like my cleanup is done if I can't tell that it isn't real. But you can always, with compositing, because you are controlling the final shoot, you can actually do so much more. So in this shot, this is an example of matte painting. So matte painting, and in here we're using a fair bit of CG as well. But matte painting is the art of taking photos and making effectively a painting, a digital painting out of them that looks as if it's real photo. And then compositing this matte painting is making this photo look like it's actual footage, shot as if it was real footage, so no one would ever be able to tell that isn't real. So in the given case, there's CG elements in the foreground because we needed the parallax for them, but in the background there's a mixture of skies and photos that are just taken from elements that are freely available in the internet, and combining them together and making it really look like this is all working together. This shot was made by Pierrick. He graduated from our UG course last year, and he also actually had some really good rote on his reel, and he has just in February now has started a job in Industrial Light and Magic. So that's cool. So these kind of things do pay off, and it's nice to kind of have these really kind of epic looking shots as well, in addition to the core skills, because it shows that you have potential. You have potential to go further, but you also need to show your core skills when you're making a reel. By the way, a few weeks from now, we have another webinar on what to actually put on your reel, which is given by Claudia Cermak, who's worked on many Oscar-winning movies, and she has seen many reels as well. So please come back to that. So this is something that then is now kind of, you know, beginning to conclude our session, is that compositors are also shot finishes, and I've sort of said it a few times already. And what this means is that we, you know, this is actually what compositors do. We take all the elements and we kind of really make it our own. We have to put a lot of this kind of creativity in there to, first of all, make sure that everything blends nicely, but also that everything makes sense and that everything is also delivered on time. So it only has to appear to look correct. So if things are done in a kind of completely fake way, you know, obviously we didn't have real destroyed town at the back, so we matte paint that. But as long as it looks right from the angle that I'm looking at, and that's another freedom that compositors have, is that because we know the final view, we can add things into the shot that works from that final point of view. So here's an example from a second year undergraduate group project, adding elements into this shot in here. So adding a bit of a matte painting at the back, some extra CG, adding all this takeoff dust, and finally putting all the elements together in a way that kind of really fits and really looks epic, so that it has the depth, and you tell the story by you know, adding more bigger dust to this. It adds scale to this spaceship taking off over there. So this is something, again, where as a compositor you try to kind of combine as much of this as you need to kind of really tell the story. What is it that the director is trying to tell? There's a big spaceship. Okay, so big spaceships have big interaction with an eye, and let's put lots of dust in here. And we control this because we are the compositors. And as a compositor, that's one really nice thing as well, is that you really feel ownership of the shot. This is my shot. I did it. Even though the 3D came from somewhere else, the FX simulation may have come from somewhere else. You are the one who's putting this together. You are the one who's actually making it look the way it needs to look. And if you don't get the elements that you need, let's say the FX element doesn't look good enough, then it's also your responsibility. You are the last step in the chain. You have to find an element that will make it work. You will have to sell this shot somehow. So then you have to problem solve this and make it work. So here's another cool example. This was an individual project from a third-year student who's working now as our studio assistant, of a keying shot, and he made this whole environment. We did the shoot ourselves as well. We have an in-house cinematographer who we can use when things like lockdown aren't happening. So we got some actors with some costumes and filmed this plate, and he created all of this. So he also did a fair bit of the 3D for the background, because these days for making things like rocks and mud, you have things like mega scans. So Unreal Engine kind of owns them, or the Epic Games, but mega scans is lots of scanned elements like rocks. So you can scatter your scene with rocks and with trees and things that have actually been scanned and then render them in 3D. So he took this 3D environment and created this himself. And this is something that kind of again might happen in the future, or if you're kind of more into that, this is what environment art is like. So if you're really into matte painting, you want to kind of get somewhere in between doing 2D and 3D. Whereas if you're purely a 2D guy, then that's perfectly fine as well. Someone else can make this 3D background for you. You just need to make sure that you can still set dress it, you can still add the smoke, you can still add the kind of elements and the look to it, and do the integration. And that's something that actually could have been even slightly better in this one here. So what kind of software do people use? I've mentioned a few in here. Just going to jump forward from that. So the main softwares that people use is Nuke. And that's the one that we teach here as well, because that's the one that most companies tend to use. And then it's used in production from the lowest end to the highest end. All major Hollywood films use that. It has an indie license. So if you work on music videos and you just kind of want to set up your own home setup, then and just do a few shots for some friends and actually get paid for it, then there's an affordable indie license. It has an educational license, which is the ones that we use to teach people, which is the full capability of the production version as well. And it also has a non-commercial version if you want to get started with compositing. I think it's limited to Ultra HD, and it has some no limits and some other limits. And the scripts that you create in the non-commercial one, you can't open them in the other ones. But it's enough to get you started. And obviously, because it's non-commercial, you're only meant to use it non-commercially. Flame is another one which is around and is used mostly in commercials these days. It's more focused on the finishing aspect of things. People used to do all comping inside of that as well. So Claudia, again, who will return in a few weeks to give us another webinar, knows Flame very, very well and used it, for example, to composite some of the main shots in Gladiator movie, Ridley Scott's one. Question, do we teach Flame at all at Escape? Not at the moment, but it's something in the pipeline. So someone asked us there. So we might do in then. We don't at the moment. Flame has an education license, so if you're a full-time student, you can get Flame, I think, for free, for educational purposes, obviously. And then there's Fusion, which is a very interesting one. It has been used in production. Blackmagic bought them a few years ago and made it free. So actually, I need to correct that. There's Fusion inside of Blackmagic Resolve. It's already built into it. They took this other software and just made it into compositing module in the Blackmagic Resolve software for free. There is a affordable version of that as well. It's only like $200 or something like that, and that one is used. It's used a lot in animation. It's used more in Europe as well than in UK, and because it has actually been around. So and in UK as well, there's a company called Access VFX, which does game cinematics. I was on a project once that for Halo 4, where they were outsourcing things, and from there, and they were doing all of it in Fusion. We were doing some stuff in Nuke. And there's another company called LexHag VFX, and one of their offices somewhere in the north is also completely Fusion. I think completely Fusion based now. So it's something that might be rising. So this is something that we are looking at doing an introduction to. So that's something that's we are teaching to some of our undergraduate students already. And Mocha and Silhouette, they used to be separate. So Mocha is historically something that's really, really good for planar tracking. Silhouette is something that's historically really, really good for rotoscoping and also for doing paint work. So some of this kind of cleanup work, if you have to do it frame by frame, if you can't use other kind of techniques, then Silhouette was really, really good because it could cache things and play things back in real time afterwards. Then Boris FX has bought both Mocha and Silhouette. They do the Continuum and Sapphire plugins as well. So that's their kind of thing. So if you buy a Boris FX bundle, you can get Mocha and Silhouette and all those things. And the very interesting thing is that Silhouette used to be a standalone software costing about £3,000, whereas now you can get it as a plugin together with within Nuke or within Fusion or within Blackmagic Resolve or within Flame as well. And now you can get Silhouette as a plugin. So for a while we were actually thinking, should we keep teaching Silhouette or should we drop it, because it was only really the biggest companies like ILM who still use Silhouette for rotoscoping. But now, because of this development, we probably will keep teaching it, because it's likely to make quite a big comeback. And because of the tighter integration between Mocha and Silhouette, you used to be able to do Mocha tracking in Silhouette anyway, but now you can do rotoscoping faster. And Mocha has some very nice recent features. One of them is called geo tracking or something like that. I don't remember what it's called. Warp tracker, something like that. But anyways, it's no longer just planar tracking. It actually tracks curved surfaces too, which is cool. So the big question is, can I get a job? If I become a compositor, can I get a job? Especially now when you think like, okay, lockdown has happened and all VFX is, all film production has stopped and everything. Then the answer is yes. The thing is, lockdown did have a massive impact on the film industry. They had to stop all the shoots. And if they don't shoot things, then obviously there is less for visual effects to do afterwards. However, the first lockdown sort of completely stopped that. But after that, the second and the third lockdown, filming was allowed to continue. One of my friends who's a camera operator, and he shoots many things with Guy Ritchie, he said actually on a film set, the new kind of COVID rules make everything a little bit more efficient as well. So, because what you have to do is you have to kind of keep social distancing. So what you do is you make sure that the gaffers are on the set at a different time as the camera team, as a different time as the lighting team, as the different time as someone else. So actually what happens is that people go on the set, do the thing, get out on time, and the next team goes in the set, gets out on time, and no one gets in each other's way. So actually, funnily enough, productions are now moving more swiftly. And the amount of content that people ask has not reduced. So people don't go to cinemas as often, but people are watching Netflix all day long. So Netflix has, more films that they want to make and more series, and they all need as much visual effects as anything else. So this is a list of LinkedIn posts that I found that were posted during last week. There's probably obviously more, but this is just the ones that I kind of came across. So I'm focusing here on London because that's where I am. But there is compositor jobs in London. There is you can see them all in here. So Scanline EFX is 5 days ago saying that they're looking for matte painting artists and compositors. Let's hide this. Then Envies is looking for compositors to join the 2D team on all levels. Then they're looking for Framestore, looking for roto artists. Dupe is looking for VFX supervisor, but I know that they were looking for compositors recently, so they might still be looking for compositors. And yeah, same here. So the question of will there be jobs? Yes, clearly visual effects has now picked up again. So the little delay that happened last year has now kind of created a new surge of visual effects happening. And now things have got to the compositing stage. Another interesting one in here as well is some of the other jobs elsewhere in the world, and I know in Bluezoo in UK as well. They occasionally look for lighting and compositing artists. So lighting and compositing is something which is sort of a border between 3D and 2D. So it's for full CG animations, which is something that Bluezoo does a lot. You need someone who puts the final shot together, but also want to give them control over the look of the shot. So because it's full CG, the main thing that changes the look is the lighting. So it's actually a person who can do a little bit of both. They can jump into Maya, or Bluezoo these days starts using Unreal as well, and jump into Nuke. So when you get your passes, you know how much you can do in Nuke, you know how much you have to do in Maya, and to get the best out of both worlds. So this is something that wasn't affected by the COVID lockdown, because you can still do CG movies, working remotely from home as well. So that's something that actually kept going. There's been a few big CG movies come out already, like Luca is coming out, or just came out. Soul came out just before Christmas. So the very, very big ones, for them, for animation, that actually didn't stop. So yes is the answer. Yes, you can get a job. You can get a job, by applying to these companies who just posted looking for compositors in the last week. So this is just the ones from last week, really, last sort of 5-7 days. Cool, thank you.